Everybody, my name is Nina Jane. I'm the director of this library, and I am super thrilled to be here for our 4th annual RomCon. My favorite thing to do all year long because I get to meet awesome authors. I get to see old friends, not old as in like old. You know what I mean? I wasn't quite my way, but okay. And I get to see friends that have been coming here the entire time and meet new friends who are just discovering us. So welcome to you all to this library for this special event. I am just going to kick it right over to Evelyn. Terrible names. But I do want to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. They're the ones that brought in all the food and really support everything that we do. And I'd like to thank Carolyn for the Romancing New England blog, which I have been following and now host to. Since I started here 4 years ago. There's so many more romance programs in the state in New England, so it's really impressive. And I want to say hello to Lily and Hannah, who are here from Read My Lips Boston, who do a program called and they do inclusive and diverse programming all throughout Boston, and I am so here for it. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to handle it over to Evelyn to get this started, and I hope you all have a great day.
I think the reason she got my name confused was because she knew me as Cynthia Johnson in the library. Let me just point out the identities of these people and let them introduce themselves. So Caroline Linden, Sebastian Nothwell, and Joanna Shupe.
Okay, I'm Carolyn Linden. I enabled this whole event because a couple years ago, after the pandemic, Mia said, there are no events, there's no conferences, there's no big signings. And I said, Mina, you have a library. You want one, you can make it. And if you get authors there,
I said it in exactly that tone as well.
Anyway, so I take like 5% credit because I was there to throw like a little bit of gasoline on the fire when she was, coming up with the idea. Anyway, I write historical romance, and I am so glad to see you all turn out today. Thank you. And this is a great event. So,
hi, I'm Sebastian Nothwell. I write historical romance and romantasy, and I also co-host the Right Here, Right Queer podcast. And I'm so excited to be here with you all today.
Hi, I'm Joanna Shupe. I also write historical romance. My books are set in the late 19th century New York City, otherwise known as the Gilded Age. I'm also excited to be here. Thank you all for coming out this morning.
And now we're talking about bucking romance trends. Well, yeah, the trends have always been the publishers. Oh no, we don't want your book because they did that last year, or it's so dead, but now everybody is into doom and gloom. And does anybody have a magic bullet? Is it writing more diverse? Is it writing different eras, or is it publishing in a different kind of way? Ideas.
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I think all markets are cyclical. They come, they go. I've been around long enough to remember several years ago when contemporary romance was really struggling to the point where a couple of big reader blogs launched a campaign they called Save the Contemporary, which if you've gone in any bookstore recently, worked. All contemporary, which is, fabulous. Like more romance, the better as far as I'm concerned. It's all good. So, historical has been around for a long time. It's obviously a very mature market in that it's not new to anybody. Our grandmas probably read it. And so I think it's definitely having a tough moment at the time, but I do believe that readers are still out there, and I'm hoping once we all get through this period of adjustment, it will all work out.
But do you find, I find, as I was saying to Sebastian, all of a sudden everybody's reading about Jane Austen, and because I choose nonfiction books, I see all these nonfiction books about Jane Austen, so I'm sort of surprised that suddenly historical is dead. But there was also a big thing about romantasy. Now, how about you guys? Are you dumping historicals for romantasy or?
That's good to hear. And I think romantasy, I mean, paranormal, question mark? I mean, that's just sort of a rebranding of paranormal romance.
Yes, thank you.
I am not the first to say that, so I am literally not gonna give credit.
It's kind of like the love child of historical romance and
And
paranormal, and they were like,
paranormal,
all right, so we want the castles and the you know, horseback warriors and all that
Yes.
stuff, the ladies in the castle. And we would also like dragons and magic and other things, so it's.
right.
Yeah.
And this is a tough question, I think, to answer because none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know, you know, what's gonna happen in the future. But it is cyclical. I sort of came in, I think, at unfortunately, the downslide of the cycle. So I wasn't really around for the sort of like 90s, early 2000s historical boom. Diana Quincy and I always laugh together. She's one of my good friends, and we always laugh that like we sort of come in on the tail end of everything. Like we come in and then everything goes. I always wanted to write in the Gilded Age, and I did write a Regency series because I knew that was my way in. And so then I switched to the Gilded Age thinking I was gonna lead this charge, and I am the charge, like there. I mean, Maya Rodale wrote a few, and that's pretty much it. I like. So.
Do it very well.
Well, thank you, but it's just a wild business. I mean, I just.
Are more people including mystery in their historical to try and pull people in that way? Because I think there's some Gilded Age mystery, but I don't know.
Yes, that are very popular. Yes, and there's a lot of Gilded Age historical fiction that is very popular. The word romance seems to be a little bit of a hurdle for some people, so, yeah.
Now, I know some people have been changing their voice to do something different since historical is better than contemporary is supposedly. But when Penguin dropped my line, they said, would you like to write a contemporary? And I thought, I can't do that, but I didn't know why. And then a fellow writer told me it's not your voice. But another trend, I think, as I see this in Publishers Weekly, is the increasing diversity on just like every single level. I started a booklet list and a display called Everyone Loves a Happily Ever After, and I have body image, Black, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, neurodivergent, older. And it used to be you had to just kill yourself, but now I've got pages and pages. Now, would you like to address that? Forerunner in the field.
Forerunner is a strong word, but it is kind of funny to hear it described as a recent trend, because like I've been living that for 36 years now. And I feel like a lot of us have been living it our whole lives, and our families and our ancestors and all that. And yeah, it is nice to have it kind of recognized more broadly and not be kind of immediately be met with disgust. When I say, oh yeah, these are my historical romances, and also it's two dudes. And it's nice that more recently, fewer people have a problem with that last part. But,
Early in my career, someone said to me, and I don't remember who, or I would credit them because it's one of the smartest things I ever heard. He said, everyone in publishing wants to be the second on the bandwagon.
Right.
Nobody wants to
That's
be
true.
the first.
That's
And it's
true.
like, isn't it? It's like, Nothing is truer. It's the very, very conservative and
It's the least.
almost like.
Least courageous industry.
That's right.
I used to review for Library Journal, or review historicals. And I was sending in electronic reviews before I ever sent in anything except page proofs. I sent in my last manuscript in 2005 and they still made me send in page proofs. And just to show how far behind they are, in 2005, somebody came into my office and said, yeah, I think you should answer this question. And it said, you know, does Evelyn Richardson work there because she dedicates so many things to people who work on the staff? And it was a fellow Regency author who wanted to do ebooks, and that was in 2005, which was pretty early. So she gave us all 50% and started publishing ebooks. In 2009, Penguin said, got this great idea. We're going to put your books as ebooks. 12%. So, did you take their offer? No.
My first book in ebook was in 2007, and they sent me this like 25-page statement because for every format they sold, they had to send a page. I remember it sold like one edition in Palm Pilot. A lot of things that don't exist anymore, and I've long wondered what happened to those books. Does somebody have a dead Palm Pilot somewhere with my book on it? But it just, I think, like there's a lot of things in publishing that people don't know are there, that are quieter markets, more niche markets, whatever you want to call it. And then when somebody finally does really well and breaks out in some way, like 50 Shades of Grey is the example that I like to give. Like publishing did not want that book. Like, no, we don't publish that kind of stuff. And then it started selling like gangbusters on when it came out of Wattpad or something.
It was on Amazon.
It was on Amazon. And all of a sudden they were like, oh, we do want to publish that book. We do. Now that there's money involved, we do want to publish that book. So it's just a very conservative industry. And then when something like that happens, they do tend to act like they invented it.
Right.
Like, oh my God, we've discovered queer romance is a thing. It's been a thing for hundreds of years, fellas. And so it's, you know, it's kind of frustrating at the same time, but I think the self-publishing boom has provided an outlet for a lot of the creativity and diversity of stories, even within very well-established genres. Even when people, you know, on the surface, maybe the book doesn't sound so incredible, but like it's doing something very different. It's a dude and a spinster. Okay. But, you know, now one of them is neurodiverse. Now they're in a different setting. You know, people are changing up things and self-publishing. There's no publisher who's, you know, very nervous and anxious about trying something new to say, oh, no, you cannot do that. So I think self-publishing has really provided an outlet where anybody can put their work out there and, you know, see how it goes and if they can find their readers.
Well,
So-
and fan fiction as well. I mean, I think AO3 has really changed the game, and
That's
you
true.
can see how many the publishers are gobbling up those really popular books that are coming off AO3. I just would remind you all have the power to make change. You may not realize that, but you do, and libraries have the power to make change. So if we want more diverse books, Black, queer, neurodivergent, you got to read them, you got to tell people about them, you got to share them online. That's the most important thing that you can do, is just talk about books that maybe no one else is talking about, or a fewer number of people are talking about. We need to lift everybody up, and especially in historical romance, because I'm on TikTok. I don't see a lot of historical romance being talked about on TikTok. So I don't know if you all do, but I don't. And I know that is a big discoverability place. That is where people, where readers discover new authors, new books. So please, I mean, we're begging you.
I'll go on that. Where do you guys discover your books? Where do you go to find them?
She pointed at her friend. She pointed at her friend. Library, okay, good.
I discovered your book in a little free library. And then I was like, oh, let me read all of them.
Is that around here? Or was it one I was talking about? Here. Steaming little free libraries.
So you can't get any fingerprints.
But that's amazing, and thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was in Boston. And
Okay. You back there, where,
You know, I listen to the authors, and if they have a recommendation, and especially if it's somebody I really enjoy, like Caroline and people I know, I don't know who I found out about Joanna from, but I'm guessing that somebody that I followed as an author, and I do go on social media way more than I should for a lot of different reasons. But I found during the pandemic in 2020, I think it was, Jodi Picoult, who does not write romance, she was listing books that were published every Tuesday. And then I paid, she only did it for about a year. But then I paid.
How dare she? Keep that up.
I had not read any Julia Quinn until somebody in the fall started talking about, are we excited about Richardson?
Yeah.
Oh, let me read that. So I rely on social media, and if one of my favorite authors recommends a book, like Julie Quinn just recommended something by Allison Goodman. And it's historical. Pretty romantic, but it's like a series, so you don't have like consummation in any of these books so far, but you definitely have two main characters, and they're this, book one, book two, and they're developing their relationship, but wouldn't necessarily be something that I would find. But I'll tell you, if you recommend something.
So you're saying we need to work harder.
Promote not only your own books.
Okay, got it.
Something, it's how I found Elizabeth Everett, it's how I.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Those kind of things.
Here and then there. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I actually find most of my book recommendations on Reddit. Because people will post like, I want this very specific kind of book.
Oh my gosh, they are so specific.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I want this exact scene in it. And I'm like, that's how you become a writer. You find what you want. You're like, finally, all right, I'm gonna write it myself.
Yeah.
I think I know like what I enjoy so much about the romance genre and reading historical fiction. I'm somebody that doesn't really do the contemporary route because I love the vibe reading and the escapism. So, and I think historical romance and no matter what the pairing or the year even, that level of escapism, I don't want anybody talking on a damn cell phone. So maybe, can you guys talk a little bit about why you like writing in those worlds, in that time? Like what draws you to want to live in that time and play out people's stories? What do you like about it so much?
I'm gonna make every one of you answer that. You're in the middle, so you can start.
Oh, okay. For me, I have a lifelong interest in history, and I think part of it stems from if you're growing up queer, your family doesn't necessarily know queer history because for all they know, you might be the only one. I think a lot of us grew up the only gay cousin, and then in our 30s discovered, oh wait, there are like 5 of us. So pre-internet, and even on the cusp of early internet, it was a lot of going into bookstores and going into like the weird hidden shelves in those bookstores where it's like, okay, here's where we'll admit that Oscar Wilde exists. And here's what we'll tell you about the Cleveland Street scandal. Here's where we'll tell you about the lengthy legal battle to decriminalize sodomy in England. Like having to search for my own history kind of made me excited to bring those stories to life for a modern audience.
Because those stories aren't told.
Yeah, generally speaking, though.
Yeah,
Joanna?
Um. For me, I feel like, we think we all know American history because we have been learning history since we were in kindergarten, but I'm here to tell you that you are not learning the right history. So for me, it was digging into, history that, of this country. I mean, I've always been fascinated with it. My ancestors came through, Ellis Island. You know, I recited the Gettysburg Address for my entire elementary school when I was in fourth grade. Like, I truly love American history, but I think it was a professor in college that really sort of flipped a switch for me, where it was not the dates and the people, it was why. And for me, that opened just a whole other world. And so I started learning about things that, you know, the Chinese Exclusionary Act, queer history, you know, just like, class struggles. Anyway, I'm blanking on like a lot of the issues that you know, reproductive history, of reproductive rights. So I just started learning about all these different things that I didn't know. And I thought, well, if I don't know them, maybe other people don't know them either. And that was all, and the late 19th century is such an explosion of change, politically, technologically, socially, just, and it's really where America that we know it became formed. And so I don't know, for some reason I'm obsessed with like those sort of 50 years after the Civil War. And I try to inject a lot of spice into like tiny little bits of history.
So I'm gonna agree with Sebastian, it's a love of history, for me, just kind of in general. I was not going to be a writer at all. My roommate in college was an English major, and so she would read like The Mill on the Floss and then write, you know, 30-page paper in one night and get an A-, and I was like, you're a witch. That's me. But then when she was, you know, on break from the serious stuff, we would go to the bookstore, she would head to the, you know, the bargain table, and she'd rapidly pick out like 5 to 10 books, and I'd say, how do you choose? Which one? You pick those 10 books in less than 3 minutes. She said, you pick the ones with the best dress on the cover. And they were all historical romance, so she was on point, she was exactly right. And as for why the Regency, to me, I mean, okay, Mr. Darcy. But beyond that, analogous to what Joanna was saying, there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in the Regency period. It was kind of like everybody broke out of the constrained Georgian era, and they kind of went wild for about 30 years, and then the Victorians came in and were like, all right, we're done with that. So, you know, there's just like, Britain was struggling with a lot of questions, in some cases, a lot more honestly than America was at the time. They were dealing with the slave trade and trying to get rid of it. It was a decades-long campaign to get rid of it. It was a very cosmopolitan city, thanks to the East India Company, which is always the villain. But what they did was there were an awful lot of Anglo-Indians. And so London was very cosmopolitan. There were a lot of people of color just on the streets, and they were accepted as, you know, humans, unlike in this country. So there's, you know, there's a lot going on. There's a war, which is always exciting. You asked about putting mystery in, and like, I love that. I was like, James Bond crossed with Jane Austen is like, ideal. So I just think there's a lot in history, like Joanna was saying, you never learned it. There's so much going on. History is wilder than anything the three of us could make up. And, you know, if you've ever picked up a historical fiction, or, you know, even a well-written historical book, you know, that's just like nonfiction, and you read about some amazing, incredible thing. Like my son comes to me one day and he goes, you know, there's a guy who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. And like, he's so enchanted by this. I'm like, this is the kind of stuff they should put in history class because it's true. It's wacky. If I wrote that, my editor would be like, nope, that is so insane. That would not happen. Take that out. And it really happened. So for me, like there was a thing going around on social media this week about how you can really learn real history from historical romance. I was like, it's the easiest and most painless way to learn things that you will never find in a textbook. The stories of people who were left out of history, of laws that in hindsight people are like, ooh, that was not a good idea. Let's not talk about that period in our collective history anymore. Historical romance will pick it up and be like, yeah, we're gonna write about this. This is definitely going in a book. So I think historical romance is just a lot.
I started reading it because I did not fit into my era or anything. I didn't have a television when I was growing up and everybody was talking about this and, you know, my family, my dad was a doctor and traveled to other parts of the world and nobody in my town ever left the Midwest. So I did not fit in, but when I read history, I did. And I would like to emphasize the point about learning history because people think, oh, it's fiction, you know, how can I believe that? Well,
We make up less than you think.
yeah, you should see the rabbit holes that people on the Regency Fiction Writers Group go down. It is incredible. And this is just a small example, but fortunately, we have the Boston Public Library, which has digitized a lot of newspapers. So if I want to check something out, I go to the London Times, and I had this really snooty copywriter who said, they didn't do Shakespeare at Covent Garden, and I said, excuse me, if you look at the April 20th. And then another fascinating side fact, I haven't put it in yet, but I didn't realize the British were wild for cranberries and they were shipping cranberries to London. So, yes, you can believe the history.
And if you ever read a historical romance and you think, that doesn't sound right, I dare you to email the author and I dare you.
What's your favorite, like, wackiest, true historical thing that you found that you did work into a book? For anyone.
Okay, I found this book written in the late 1700s. My subtitle was A Guide to Rich Ladies and Where to Find Them. And it was written by a second son, meaning somebody who wasn't going to inherit all the family money. And he was like, essentially, my penniless brothers. Good luck. Here's the treasure map for you. And that's all it is. That's all the book is, a listing. Lady Ann Johnson lives in Portland Square, 10,000 pounds. And I was like, this can't be real. This is got, nope, it's real. Absolutely real. Like, you couldn't make that up if I tried.
Any other great story?
I know you guys must have some.
I'm drawing a blank. That's all you.
It's the wildest that we were able to work into a book that's really making me struggle. 'Cause
Yeah.
like,
Oh, just share the
Or one that's gonna share, like, whatever.
the hardest part of writing historical fiction is writing something that's more compelling than the history, but also feels believable. It's difficult now. Sorry, I am also trying to.
I mean, it's hard because I'm sure it's the same for you, like you write it, there's so many facts rolling around in your head, and then you move on to another project, and it's like, I don't know, my memory is not what it was. Perimenopause is a wild ride. So just.
Didn't you write one about a female stockbroker?
I did, yes, I did, and female stockbroker,
But it was like
which is based
decades
on-
before women were
allowed in the stock market, based on the Woodhull sisters, who were just these two just absolute hellions in like the 1870s, who just ran roughshod over the city and were backed by somebody here is probably gonna know better than me. was it a Vanderbilt? I think it was one of the Vanderbilts was like their backer. I mean, of course, like one of them was his mistress, so like that helped. But I mean, yeah, I discover things all the time that I just try to throw in. And if you read my books, please read the author's notes first because they take a lot of time to write. So
And
please,
a lot of.
and I'll put the notes in there of like, yes, this really happened. Yes, this is true. So
I did think of two.
Yay.
The one I haven't been able to work into a book yet is
Yet.
The Public Universal Friend. I don't know if anyone's okay, there we go. Some people also read that very compelling Wikipedia article. It was, they were a Quaker in, I wanna say late 1700s, New England, who, assigned female at birth, had an illness as a young adult, and then came out of that fever saying, all right, God told me I don't have a gender anymore, and my goal is to be everyone's friend.
wow.
And the community was like, all right, we're Quakers, this, sure. Wildly chill for the standard of most Protestants of this time. And the one I was able to work into a book was the New England Vampire Panic. Just
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
I was able to work that slightly sideways into The Haunting of Heatherhurst Hall, but yeah, just as a way for these two very spooky young ladies to bond with each other over, did you hear what happened in Rhode Island?
Crazy stuff.
In the back there.
Well, we're talking about research. So I write contemporary romance, so I don't have to do research. Really not a PhD program, I'm done. But how do you I imagine doing research now looks different than it would have like 30 years ago. How do you find your information? Do you find yourself going to a lot of primary sources, or are you reading historian accounts and like what kind of research are you doing?
One of the best places that I discovered, John Jay Criminal College, which is in New York City, has digitized all of the trial transcripts from like forever. So you could go to 1888 and see what the cases were that were being brought. You could read the actual words that were spoken in court. That was really fascinating for me. Just a lot of F-bombs, which you would not expect. I mean, I didn't expect it in court. But you can see the way women are treated. You can see the way lower classes were treated. I mean, that for me was really, and it helped when I wrote The Rogue at Fifth Avenue, whose hero is a lawyer, that I used a lot from those digitized transcripts.
As a librarian and a researcher, I would tell you that the digitization has just made a huge difference. I used to go out to Wellesley College to read the microfilm of the Times, and now I just sit at home and type it in. And the same way with Ackerman's repository. Since you're all from Massachusetts, you can get a new card at Boston Public Library, and I urge you to do so. The most excruciating research I ever did was I was trying to trace tea in India way back, and there was a book written by a French monk, and I could find a copy of it at BPL on their rare books. They were terrible to me. They said, well, do you have a publisher? No, I just want to read this rare book. I did have a publisher, but still. Then I went in and they proceeded to talk about the Red Sox in very loud voices down at the end of the room while I was trying to read 16th century French. And then I went out to Wellesley College to look up the microfilms, and Wellesley College had one from the same book, but a century earlier. And I went up there and I said, I'm looking for this book. And I said, yeah, sure, here you go.
Yeah, and for me, because I write books set in the US, Times Machine is, a godsend. That's the New York Times digitized from,
Also available at most of your public libraries or your library.
So I question that you don't do research.
Yeah.
You're reading things you know, and you're gonna be like. Just you wait.
Like Google Maps.
Yeah, no, you'll be like, someday you're gonna write about somebody who's something that you don't know anything about. It'll come to you and you'll be like, why did I come up with this idea? What am I doing?
Or something.
And you'll have to figure it out.
Of course you had to change it partially, don't you know that?
For me, research is, you never know when you're gonna find something that sticks in your mind and you go, ooh, I need to use that somewhere, somehow. Maybe I won't have a good story for it yet, but you kind of remember it. And I like the nonfiction books that are, written in a colloquial way, like not a historian view, but the popular history, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And there will always be something in there I'm like, that's very interesting. Oh, there was a nationwide contest to figure out how to make a clock that kept accurate time. Like that's true. That's really cool. And it took years and years and years. And then they tried to stiff the guy who did it. And it's like, wow, this is just like today. So to me, it's just, you never know. And then once you find that thing, you hit the Google and you go into Google Books and you go to libraries. Boston Public Library is a great resource. I've been there.
Happy Trust is another.
If
one.
you're, depending on how much money you're willing to spend on books, you can find that one very bizarre but extremely focused title that somebody wrote 20 years ago and you can get a copy and read it. And so, it's kind of hard to say. It's like, where do you get ideas for stories? All around you. Somebody behind you in line at the coffee shop says something and you're like, you're driving stuck in traffic and you see something happen and you're like, that would be a really interesting, meet cute. So research is kind of the same way. You just kind of gotta have an open mind and be willing to say, all right, that's really interesting to me. I would like to use that at some point. I'm gonna file that away and hold on to it. And then when I get to a point where I have a story that sounds like it would fit, then I'm gonna go as deep as I can, figure it out. That's what I do.
Barbara, I think you had a question up there.
Yeah, I'll also add in books is a great place for research.
Yeah, I just signed your royalty check over to books. You gotta exercise some restraint on that side.
Yes, you do. Okay, so differentiating with straight historical fiction, covers a huge thing, and one of the big things you get with rejection letters or with agents, no one's buying this time period, no one's buying this time period. But I will say that historical romance seems to be safely comfortable within this 200 or 300 year span, and you're not necessarily being forced to go into 20th century, which is where a lot of the trend is right now with historical fiction, or mythological times. Why do you think it is that you've been very able to stay in that bubble, and what's the appeal of it that seems to keep you guys in that, from 1600 to the end of the. This seems like you've been very lucky that no one's buying that period. Whereas in historical fiction, that is not a very popular time period.
Oh, they're telling us all nobody's buying that period.
Right.
What do you write? Ancient Rome, Regency, Gilded Age, Civil War.
Yeah.
No, nobody's buying it.
Right.
Hashtag bring back medievals.
Right.
Emma Denny is trying.
Who?
Emma Denny, okay.
Yeah, that's what I think indie romance is so great, because there are people writing ancient Rome and 1920s and everything. So to answer your question, I think publishing got big data. And then they started going through and saying, these sell really well, these do not sell very well. Let's just buy all of these and none of these.
Well,
And-
and the way to stop that is to be Rebecca Yarros or Colleen Hoover, publish it yourself, make a boatload of money, and then they want that.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm still working on step 2.
it's a little bit of money, then.
Change into those popular times, like, do they ever say, no, could you do Gilded Age, could you do 1920?
I mean, I'll ask my agent, and back when there used to be publishing conventions, I would ask everybody, I was pretty shameless about asking editors, so what do you think is the next big thing? And the answer is no one knows. I mean, they'll say, would you consider writing one of these? I'm like, okay, it's gonna take me a year to write that book because I know nothing about that time period. Can you promise me there's still gonna be a market for that book in a year? And they're like, oh, no, of course not. I'm like, we have a problem, right? Like,
Yeah, in publishing, the whole industry moves so fast, but my first series was Regency. I wrote it to land a contract and a publisher in the hopes that that publisher would gamble with me and let me write a Gilded Age series. They did. It did miserably, and they asked me, will you go back, we need you to go back to Regency, and I was like, hashtag no thanks. And it just happened that another publisher had read that Gilded Age series, loved it, and said, well, let us take a swing at it. And so Avon HarperCollins took a swing at it. I think really there's a packaging, I don't think it's the stories that are the problem, I think it's a packaging problem, which I think traditional publishing recognizes. They tried the illustrated covers with historical. Mimi Matthews has like a new book coming out that has this really cool like gate. It's not illustrated, but it's like a gate on it. I think it's YA.
It's illustrated, yeah, it's kind of like a YA-ish, but it's like, they said an academy.
It's a real historical romance. It's like.
Is it?
not
Okay.
It's not, okay.
I heard it was like,
School for Ruin, I think is the name of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm bringing that up because I mean, I love that cover.
Yeah.
So I think there's a packaging problem with historical romance, and I think I know with my next release, which is coming out this summer, we tried to do something different with the cover in the hopes that it might catch some eyeballs that would not pick up, you know, your illustrated or perhaps your dress cover. So anyway, I'm off on a tangent, but like, I don't know what the answer is.
There's one thing that we haven't touched on here, we've done self-publishing and publishing, but we haven't done the smaller presses. And that, when Penguin told me, you know, can you write a contemporary? And I said, no, and they said, try a fictional biography, and I did, but they didn't like the person that I was. She wasn't well enough known, but then I just went off and wrote a little series on my own. And a fellow author, after seeing that it died, I noticed was selling to Epicenter Press, Camel Press. And so I wrote to them, they're out in Kenmore, Washington, but the woman has a daughter in Arlington, which was handy. But she came and she'd been a romance buyer for Walden's, and she said, sure, we'll take your series. Now, it's sort of print on demand, and they don't do a huge bit of marketing or anything, and I'm making pennies, but I don't have to come up with all of that stuff myself because I hate arts and crafts. But there are a lot of smaller presses around, and some of them are starting to get bigger and bigger names. So that's another way to go, don't you think? Or
I think, but the elephant in the room is the mass market and the pricing of books as well. That you're nodding. Scary.
What do you think is driving the move away from mass market?
Money.
The book, it's Target, and Walmart, and there's just no shelf space for it.
It's all booksellers.
Right.
Booksellers, trade paperback, the bigger ones are much more profitable for bookstores. And mass market was designed to be like cheap. And readers loved it, and as long as there was space in stores for them to find it, it was great, and bookstores made enough on it that they were like, okay, cool. But now, because of the cost of paper and everything else, even mass market it just can't be that cheap anymore. So it's lost its great advantage. And so
don't you think ebooks may have cut into it a little bit because they're cheaper?
They do fill
Massively.
they fill that economic niche now. Because they're like, you know, $2.99 to $5.99, which is what used to be able to get a paperback for.
Right.
Yeah.
But like even the print on demand places don't offer pulp paperback as an option, like that's not a size they offer, that's not a paper stock they offer, and print on demand has really kind of undercut any, like you said, any economic advantage to mass production.
It's just not, it's not the most economic way to print
Yeah.
books, period, for any reason.
But now
So-
more and more, even the standard hardbound authors are coming out in trade paper and not in hardbound.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, because they're going down.
Like
to
all
meet
the
the
prices
price.
have gone up, right? I
Yeah.
mean, trade paperback used to be $12.99 and now it's more like $16-17.99, same for
20.
hardcovers, right? Hardcovers are now 30s.
Yeah.
And they used to be, you know, it used to be like $24.99 would be your new hardcover release, right? And that was just in the last few years. So it's, you know, it's a big economic problem as well. I mean, I don't blame bookstores for wanting to make money. They're businesses. Publishers are in business with the bookstores, so they're kind of over a barrel there as well. Like they want to sell paper books. They have to give the paper books that they want. But I think more insidious for historical romance has been this belief that historical romance authors won't sell in trade very well. And in case you're wondering, yes, I was told that by someone at a publisher. I did not make that up on my own. And I have no idea if that's true. But it's definitely been part of the calculation of why historical romance has been like disappearing from bookstores, because they're very conservative, they're very worried. It's an expensive mistake to make, right? To print 30,000 copies of a book in trade and then it doesn't sell because those readers are like, well, where's the mass market? I want the mass market for $8.99. I don't want to pay $18.99 for this trade. So it's just been a hard problem. And I think publishers kind of missed the boat a little bit with the ebooks because they were like, well, we want to keep paper bookstores around. We don't want them to, I think everybody kind of freaked out about how easy ebooks were. And so I think they've.
But
been a
another
problem.
area that's grown incrementally, and we haven't talked about it here, is audiobooks.
Yes,
Um,
which are also expensive. Yeah.
yeah, but have you noticed a growth in that in your sales and stuff?
I self-funded 2 audiobooks through Kickstarter because otherwise I would not be able to afford to do that on my own. I had to kind of find a new system to be like, if you want this, pre-order it, and if enough of you do, it will exist. Yeah.
How many of you listen to audiobooks? Read. Okay. I can't remember if I've heard it, so I don't, but there was a question back.
Yeah, I just, was thinking about like things in places, like different ways that historical booking trends. What do you feel like are things, like issues that historical can handle more deftly? Like I have strong opinions about this, I'm not going to share them. Like things that historical can handle more deftly that other subgenres like struggle to do.
Class differences?
It's a good question. I'm curious to hear your answer.
To be honest, like I also write for romance, and like my feeling is that it is honestly really hard to handle the truth of how scary it is to be a queer person in the United States right now in contemporary. And so you end up with a lot of soft contemporaries because writing it the way it really is frightening. And so it is easier to talk about it in 1820 because you're like, what is this?
Between that time and what we're actually doing. You're enough of this setting that's not now that you're bringing.
But you can forget that. Okay.
So I write a newsletter every week that I called Our Mad Wicked Folly because Queen Victoria called women's rights a mad wicked folly. She's the most powerful woman on the planet. She is not for women's rights. So that newsletter that I write every week is a comparison to the Gilded Age. So I take something that's happening today and I compare it to what was happening, and the parallels are frightening.
Yes.
And so a lot of people have said to me, I'm so glad you're doing this because it makes me feel like we're all gonna be okay. And I have to say, not everybody was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about what comes in right after the Gilded Age, which is Jim Crow, which it's eugenics that leads to the 1930s rise of Nazism in Germany, which leads to the Holocaust. I mean, not everybody was okay. And so on some level, I agree with you. Writing in history does show that we persevere. That's what we as a species are meant to do, is to persevere. But on the flip side of that, it has made me very fearful.
Yes.
So, it's almost like I know too much and I don't want to know it anymore. But, so that's why I sort of write this newsletter that I'm just every week sharing, like, looking at everything. So anyway. Both good and bad.
I love it, I have to say, some of the newsletters, most I'll read, but yours,
Thank you.
top of mind, and I even forwarded to
Oh, thank
one
you.
of my sons.
It only takes about 4 hours every week to do that. Thank you.
But how do you keep up your enthusiasm for that?
It's pretty depressing. I mean, it's pretty depressing. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about the Comstock laws again. I can't believe, we're talking about, the wealth gap, the immigration dog whistle stuff. I mean, it's just, it's really, I wish I didn't know what it can all lead to. I just really, but maybe by bringing attention to it, it helps people know what to fight against. That's, I guess, what I'm hoping for, that, so.
And I think that's it, to say that, this is not, these ideas are not new.
Right.
These impressions, this is all recycled,
Right,
retired
this
stuff.
playbook has been played.
It has been played.
Before.
People have been through it, people saw it, people have endured and survived it, and some people have not survived it. And we kicked it out. We were like, no, we rejected it. So, it's like, hopefully there's a lesson to be learned. Like, I did a thing with Elizabeth Everett, and we were talking like, are we actually all living a Regency life at this point? Why is your hero a Duke at age 32? Well, his 2 older brothers died of childhood diseases. And his father died of complications of flu. And his wife died of, complications of pregnancy.
Right.
It's like, all this stuff is coming back. And so I think, I hope that when people read historical romance, they can look at it and say, you know what, there's a reason why we invented all this stuff, because 200 years ago, when your 7-year-old got a fever, there wasn't a whole lot you could do. You could just sit there and pray.
Most men had more than one wife. It's just really astounding.
And men died too. They got injured and died of sepsis because there's no antibiotics.
Right.
Oh, you got a cut on your foot. Like, start picking out your funeral suit. I mean, so I would hope that people would, read it and see like, oh, that sounds alarmingly familiar, and it's tragic that these things are happening to people in this story as they happen in real history. I don't want that to happen to me, to my family, to my loved ones. I don't want people I care about to be treated that way. Hopefully.
Way in the back, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even see that one, sorry, you can duke it out yourself, yeah.
I'll start the new book. Quick question. I love historical series on TV, like Outlander, Bridgerton, The Gilded Age, Downton Abbey. Do you see that as helping with your sales, or is it restricting it too much because that's all the people are seeing?
For me personally, it doesn't translate.
It translated really well for Julia Quinn.
Yes.
Yeah. She got an enormous boost from that.
Yeah.
It does motivate me to write sometimes because you see it on TV and you're like, I know from my research what you're skipping over.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell that story.
So my reading group has talked about this kind of extensively about we don't understand why publishing hasn't made a bigger push for historical because we see such a correlation in the world building and escapism of historical romance and how similar that is to romanticism. And so we as a whole, we discuss it constantly. They're like, it's basically, it's different, but it's the same thing. You get the same rush, you get the same elements of things when you're sitting there reading a historical romance as when you go into a different world and all the world building and all the things that are in a romance. And we're like, I just wanted your thoughts on that.
I have to think that the data, I mean, it's great that people are talking about it and wondering about it and discussing it. I have to assume the data is not translating into pre-orders and sales and what they're seeing on social media. I mean, they're just, I have to, I mean, I'm not seeing it.
I think we
So-
need a handful of romanticy book talkers to make that connection.
Right.
And pick up, even if by accident, a regular historical romance and be like, this is also awesome, and talk about, like, sometimes that's all it.
And I'm
It
sure it's
takes.
happening in small numbers, but we just have not seen the big breakout, like wowza. I mean, Evie Dunmore, that first book was an absolute explosion and really was a blockbuster. And I think we thought, oh, okay, here we go. And for whatever reason, I don't know that other authors were able to make anything out of that explosion. So I mean, really, like, the power rests in your hands, like.
One of the things that I was thinking about that, though, as I was reading in Publishers Weekly, is that booksellers don't know where to put things. Do you put romantasy sort of with sci-fi? They don't.
Right now, they're putting it on the lead table right in front of the door.
Yes,
and
yeah.
walking.
But they sort of think of it as such a different genre, not a crossover, but I don't know what percentage of you buy books from bookstores? Okay. So.
I wonder too, if there's this productive idea that history was boring. So when that's
That's a little bit of it.
historical, and then you add romance, which comes with its own, like,
So
it's a
that's-
dirty word, it's something.
Yeah, so that's kind of my
Correct.
thought, that like romanticy has taken the history part out of it, and so even though a lot of those books are based on very real historical worlds, it doesn't, the historical word is missing from the title, and people think it's gonna be a history book with maybe
Again,
some-
I think we have a packaging problem.
It's,
We
yeah,
have
it's a
an
marketing
image
issue.
problem and a packaging problem.
While I write monster romance and romanticy, and I'm in a bunch of romanticy groups, and it's so like wild to me because we all read historical a lot. And so it's just such an interesting dichotomy to me because like your guys' books are the books that we talk about amongst ourselves. And the
Maybe
ones
we need to do like some serious cross promotion between the
Yes,
romanticy and, it's like, I could absolutely. You know, if you're looking for this, but you need some magic or, you know, a quest, romanticy is right there waiting for you.
Why not both? Why not both?
Okay.
Yeah, try both.
We're gonna continue this conversation in the next panel in the afternoon, but right now we have to set up for Family Feud. Romance. Beyond safe for work. Thank you guys so much. Evelyn said that she is also a historical romance author. So all of our authors will be upstairs for a few minutes to sign, but we're going to switch this over to Family Feud, and we'll be back here in 15 minutes. So buy your book, get them signed really quick, and then come on back.